Let's come to India. The IMF forecast for growth at 7% has been even better, as has been pointed out, than India's own economic survey. What makes you optimistic about India's growth story?
Yeah. So the 7% growth is firstly a reflection that the last year growth turned out to be much stronger than we had expected it to be, and so there are some of those carryover effects. Secondly, we are seeing private consumption recovering. Last year private consumption growth was around 4%, driven by weakness in consumption in the rural economy. And that was also a reflection of weak monsoons and weak harvests.
Yeah.
Here we're seeing an improvement in rural consumption. If you look at some of the indicators for this year, we're seeing that, for example, if you look at two-wheeler sales or these fast-moving consumer goods, which are usually indicators of recovery in rural consumption, we're seeing that happening. But again, of course, we have to follow the data closely and see what happens over time. But we expect to see private consumption recover alongside continued public investment, which has been one of the main drivers for growth.
And at these numbers, you are forecasting that India will be the third largest economy in the world by 2027?
Yes.
And that's, of course, at these numbers. And we live in uncertain times, but fingers crossed that it is as you say. But the big challenge, along with these very sunny, optimistic, robust growth numbers, is that of employment. Now, you have said that India would need to create anywhere between, 60 million to 148, am I saying it right? 148 million jobs before 2030. The economic survey talks about needing about 8 million every year, 8 million additional jobs. Your number would peg it at anywhere between 10 million to 24 million every year before 2030. What worries you about not just unemployment, but underemployment, which doesn't get talked about enough?
Yeah. So firstly, in terms of the size of the economy, I think it's important, as you also point out, which is what brings up living standards is per capita income.
Yeah.
And of course, that is a bigger challenge. And the Prime Minister has talked about Viksit Bharat 2047 as a goal. But that's where we really want to see the action, is in terms of per capita income rising. The job situation in India, India actually is, if you look at among its G20 peers, India is a country where growth, if you look at the last decade, about 6.6% growth. But if you look at employment growth, it's been under 2%. So it's been a lot more capital intensive growth than in several of its peers. And so it comes down to the question of how to change that and how to create a whole lot more jobs. There is, this debate that is going around about which sectors can we stimulate and which, should it be manufacturing? Should it be services? What should it be? Frankly, if you want to create an additional 60 to 148 million jobs, you really do need broad-based growth in all the sectors. So the areas where, there's what can be done in a shorter period of time. There are what will take a longer amount of time. So in the near term, improving the ease of doing business, there's been a lot of changes, but still, there remains the case that if you can have dealing with regulations, compliance, even on the tax front, red tape, all of that, the less hassle it is, the more you see in terms of investment going in. And so states like Gujarat and Tamil Nadu, for example, seem to be getting a lot of interest, including from foreign investors, because of the positive business
What are they doing
climate.
right or different from others?
So it seems that there is, though there may be constraints in the actual formal mechanisms, there seems to be solutions, in the sense that the bureaucracy is able to deliver faster solutions to move things along. So that's what we see. Secondly, I think it is absolutely critical to have more flexibility in the labor market. Labor laws were passed in 2019-20. They still need implementation, and that's going to require working with the states to make that happen. Public investment, which has been very strong in India, will need to continue because there's a lot more that needs to be done. And lastly, this is an opportunity for India because the world is looking at India as a country to diversify into, right? Given the geopolitics, India, in fact, benefits in a sense from the fact that countries are saying, well, if we're going to diversify out of others, we'd like to move into India. So it's a great opportunity. But to be able to do that, you have to see India as open to trade.
Yeah.
Because to be a part of the global supply chains, you should be willing to freely be able to import your inputs that you need so that you can export your final products. Right? So that's another area. But for getting to much higher levels of per capita income, it's going to start with much more investment in human capital, in education, in skilling. It remains the case that when you talk to companies, that they talk about the skill mismatch, lack of enough skills. And it's true. If you again compare India to its peers, in terms of the number of years of formal education of its workforce, it's lower than its peers. So investing in human capital, education, and health, all of that is super critical.
How do we understand, though, the paradox? As you know, those of us who are not economists, we look at these soaring growth figures. We look at India sort of being almost like this island, at least in South Asia, sort of an island of relative stability, politically, economically. And then we look at the unemployment or the underemployment numbers. And, you know, for young people, this has been a simmering big issue. We've had it be a major talking point, even in our recent elections. And without drawing you into the politics of anything, how do we, as an economist, how do you understand this seeming paradox? Great growth story, but a real challenge of jobs and employment.
In a sense, it's not a terrible paradox. Firstly, as you said, we should recognize that India's growth, by any standard, is impressive.
Yeah.
It contributes a large amount to global growth. It's a significant amount of global growth. So again, given everything that country has had to face with, coming out in its form that it is really quite impressive. Now, a bunch of that growth has come from public investment, which was absolutely needed. Without a doubt, you need public investment. So a bunch of metrics have improved. There's a lot more public investment happening. The financial sector is a stronger position. Corporate balance sheets are in a stronger position. But then, yes, then there is this question of a lot of this growth is coming without enough job creation.
Yeah.
And there is where I go back to the same issues, that if you look at investment in India, while household investment and real estate investment is doing very well, corporate investments in, say, machinery and equipment is not doing as strongly. Mm-hmm. Now, this may take time, and maybe this is where the beginning of a string of recovery there. But again, anything that can be done in terms of ease of doing business, what can be done in terms of not taxing labor, indirectly by making it, labor market so inflexible, all of that will help workers. Human capital, skilling, all of that is going to require concerted effort.